#Team Mooney, coming to what is probably a late in the series of reviews to discuss after a month or two, but I wanted to get a review on this since it is just as good as it was for people who were going to see the Backrooms at the times. The latest of the newest trend to ruin the rooms of horror, of what you can truly be obsessed about. Obsession 2026. And after seeing it only once, I can tell you it just brings chill in your spines on the definition of careful what you wish for. And to also be more precise of how this is all set up to basically where you don't try to set up to be a stalker, but you end up being a stalker. I mean, and be somehow worse than that at the end. So this guy at the beginning, just gonna run it back real quick on the character, and for record, people are gonna say, "Oh, well, you don't remember the character's certain name." Well, excuse me, if only I went to see it once, okay? I mean, but it's still a matter to discuss about. Uh, Bear, which would you think just give you warm moment breaks, but this one you doesn't apparently let go, at least until it's all done psychological horror. I mean, but this the character we know as Bear has an amazing and intense crush on someone he's had since high school named Sarah Harper, who no, sorry. That is unfortunately not her since she'll be KO later. Nikki Freeman is her name. Freeman. I figured she was lucky to be free afterwards. Who he is setting up, practicing in a bar with his friends at a local breakfast, you know, restaurant where he's practicing to one of her friends about really trying to get that moment where he asks her out and everything. And when it seems he's still having trouble with that, it is when his pal Ian just says to just line off of it and just basically, just go and ask her how you feel and all that. But also at the same time, kind of hope he's failing. He gives him a little advice to call her Freaky Nikki, which turns out is just to hope to ruin his chances because he wants to have Nikki, but he doesn't want to hurt his friend at the same time, at least not at that time. And so they all set up, they get to all get her at an actual bar at night and everything. They're just making jokes and everything. Or, sorry, being ahead of myself. Before all of that, this guy had pretty much the worst, way to come back home to, which only is really more sadder when you think about it. Basically lives by himself with his parents dead and all that, blah blah blah, and he finds his own little pet cat die from getting into his pills, and he's neglected, and oof, oh, it sets you bad, and especially worse than what comes later with that poor kitty. But anywho, we get back to the moment where Nikki's back in town. Then he gets the moment to ask her out. They all get a chance to meet up again at the tavern bar at night. Where at the same time, this poor fool doesn't know that there's already a girl who's interested in him. Well, who's also been his friend just as long as Nikki, named Sarah, but he's too starstruck over Nikki to even have him that. But I, again, being ahead of myself, before even going to the tavern bar, he picks up a witch willow from a local taffy store, I think. And boy, does that come into place later for what pretty much sets up the whole genre of this movie. After the whole funny games later at the tavern bar at night, and then when he gets the chance to drive Nikki home, and when he gets the chance, when she asks him that if she likes him or not, he just can't man up and say he likes her or not. He cannot say that. She can't even say, that. And then Nikki, honestly, you also bring back on Nikki's side because he clearly sees more Bear as a little brother than actually, being liking him. But he doesn't want to hurt their feelings. I mean, this is all about not trying to hurt the other, but in the end, everybody gets self-inflicted upon each other. Kind of a philosophy you take. What's worse than just the idea of being self-hurt, of hurting than just hurting yourself. Which side is better, and you think? Okay, bottom line is after he botched that up, and when Nikki was about to go through her, house door after getting out of the car, you know, car, that's when, out of either pity or desperate, just as a fleeting cry, he pulls out the wish willow, looks at the box and instructions, and he scoffs at it because it does just the whole idea of being a wishful thing like a chicken bone, but in this case it's a stick, that he's just simply flat out, before not thinking twice on details of what he's saying into its wish, saying, I wish Nikki loved me more than anyone else in the whole world, then breaks it. And thinking, well, probably nothing. Then, suddenly he sees Nikki just stood at her place where she was about to go to her front door. But she stopped in her tracks and then immediately turns around, goes to Bear's door, and starts to being charming him, starts to get flattered and all that. And immediately is out of character. Even if it's a witch, deep inside it's not what the real Nikki would do. And we see moments of the real Nikki actually coming out where she's going like, what the hell? And then suddenly she's like going into moments where she is like walking backwards and stuff. But point is, she somehow persuades Bear to take him back to his apartment, which is just a running mess, just to let you know. I mean, not too much later after Nikki becomes, a new roommate, so to speak. And they're like getting closer and closer, being like in the same bed and everything. And he has his chance to make his move. And do you think our boy Bear decides to really not to give in? No, that boy is tempted. He wants to dog on that moment. But then again, the real Nikki shows up. She's going, what the fuck? And then suddenly she's flying off the bed, It's going to speak. And that's only a moment of half the crazy comes. Then she starts crying, going back into Bear's bed, saying, my dad has cancer. He's not going to live much longer. And the idea of just lying, manipulating, just tells you how corrupted the witch can actually be. And actually, it's actually the ironic part. Since this whole thing was about not telling everybody the real truth to each other, and now all they could do is just live in a lie, It's actually really deep when you think about that. Like, whoa. But anywho, Bear, for whatever reason, shrugged this off. Decides to just have a good night with, Nikki, not sexually speaking, but sleeping in bed, and what he sees the next day, what should have been red flags to him, is that Nikki undigs up his dead cat he buried, puts it in the room, and puts it in some kind of ritual-like shrine for him to find liking. I mean, like, what? And then, if that wasn't red flags enough, he goes to work, talks to his friend Ian, and starting to figure something's off with Nikki. But does he say what really happened? Do you know how crazy he is? No, and honestly, it would have been shoved up more than they would have had been. But we see how more and more of Wish Nikki, as people call her, starting to becoming more and more concerning to her one purpose as the wish, to love and to be there and to be everything than anything else in the whole world, and to even more so. And now to even Sorry for that, ladies and gentlemen. And now, even after all that, somehow he goes back to his house after things going good. Mickey goes back to her house. She comes back to him saying, "I'm sorry how it was way it was weird. It was kind of freaky, Mickey." And somehow she says, "I know you like me, and I like you too." And then he somehow falls for his own fantasy. They do the thing and all that. In the past few weeks, they are living and just like some romantic side of Romeo and Juliet, which is gonna be poetic. What I'm saying at the end, a very effed up Romeo and Juliet. And while he feels like he's having the most good time, we all know Nikki is suffering inside, and he's just not caring an inch about that. And his friends Ian and Sarah are just getting more and more concerned about it, but he is not having it. And only later does Ian mention to Baird that Nikki lied about her dad having cancer, making it more realizing that things have been happening to Nikki ever since he made the wish, making him finally trying to breaking out of the idea that this was somehow by just because that's what Nicky really felt, to realize it's because it's what he wanted. That because he wished for it. That he goes back to confront Nikki, but then she's in more tonight. We start to hear more of the true deep demon side of her, or however as the witch operates. And instead of confronting, she just says, okay, then goes back home and then going to sleep. But then when he goes to bed, Nikki's like standing up her in a corner, walking backwards and all that, being freaking to go, I just love to watch you sleep. I'm surprised, yeah, and probably taking locks of his hair too, maybe even a tooth, who knows. But then even when she gets back in bed, he's trying to get out and she's going like, stay! Then she wakes up to try to go to work and she duct tapes the entire door. It's just insane. I mean, it just gets more and more depraved like this, and he's just going through that while also with her friend Sarah to comfort, to lean on, and all of this. But all she still say, it's just weird how they're just together, and she, poor unfortunate soul, he is still not seeing the, you know, the lines connected. How Sarah loves him, he loves him, but does he realize that? No. Instead, he only realized that he's eating a sandwich of his dead cat from that her rich girlfriend put into her just for him to really only then starts to find out what the heck going on. He calls the number on the back of the witch well. He gets the answers from this mysterious guy on the phone, who I am convinced is the same voice actor as, Mandalorian. Just the voice sounds similar, but just he tells him, like, I like this, so what, alter the wish? And he says, I'm sorry, we really don't do that. And saying, and finding out all is real. He's asking, is her love for me real? And this guy gives the best response, saying, just because you wish this for her doesn't make it any less real. I mean, yeah, from one point of view, but the other, it's what you want. It's not what she wants. But in all of that, he just starts to literally think about cancer, which he also, the answer is no. And apparently he finds out that she's either stuck like this forever until as long as he lives. Because as long as he's alive, the witch will remain active. Once he's dead, our little freaky Nikki goes back to being just Nikki. And knowing all that, she goes into the house where Nikki decides to just still be in place where she was, wishing him goodbye, honey, and all that. While at the same time, not moving in muscle, but somehow doing things to herself. Like, somehow still staying in place and urinating on the floor, on the carpet. God. She starts to change her makeup, change her face, making her look more appealing to women that he is looking at and stuff. And while he is going through all that, he gets on the invite Ian gave him to go on a boys' night. But Freaky Nikki finds a way to get into that, and she has to really, the whole thing. And when the moment they play that, that thing you played in college, like spin the bottle and kiss, the girl next to you. Fortunately, it was Sarah, which he is only maybe getting a glimpse that there was somebody who actually loved him this whole time. But, of course, Freaky Nikki ain't having that, so she gets in front of Sarah, she gets them, but then that's when the real Sarah come out and starts to hurt her, or maybe it was Freaky Nikki hurting herself just to keep the real Nikki at bay, or whatever. But the point is, that was almost too much for anybody. Just for he starts to cripple under the pressure and just asking which Nikki, Freaky Nikki, if he loves him. You're anything to me, man. Are you by Nikki? And he says, which is been what I've been saying this whole time, but just says it so well to make him realize partially that I'm your freaking Nikki. God help this poor stupid son of a bitch that he reluctantly is just going to bed with her that night and everything, and then he gets a chance to get out of there to reach out to her friend Sarah and everything. And unfortunately, that little conversation would be the last of the night as Farrah finally gets to confess to him that he loves him. And when he starts to feel connected to him, that's when freaking Nikki shows up, breaks the glass, uses a brick, and smashes her freaking face and under the, car wheel, over and over and over again. Saying, it's okay, baby, it's okay, but this is kind of your fault because you wished for this. Yeah, damn right it's his fault. And he is finally then starting in. No, actually, I have to rewind back. Before leaving the house, he hears when the voice of the real Nikki, when Freaky Nikki's asleep, the real Nikki comes out only in her muttering, in her sleep, and she's begging him to kill her, and that is God, this poor fool is just still so full of himself, saying, what's so wrong with being with me? That despite all of this, he still wants to be with Nikki, even if she's like this. But, and only that he really gets the karma he deserves after that. But Sarah did not deserve that. No, that was a forced victim, true victim, and all of this that happened in there. And what happened was worse. And I'm not even gonna describe it for the video. Just one of the. All I can say is that they did a little bit of what Batman Riddler did, duct tape in her face and half naked and just a share of her dead body, like some kind of ritual. Then Nikki starts to look more like Sarah to be more appealed to him. But all this after finally snapping and after getting away from Nikki, after disposing Sarah's body, which he'll unfortunately regret leaving, he'll goes back to the taffy store to buy another witch willow, and only to find out by the one who's in charge of them that you only get to break one, and that only someone else can use a wish that can possibly undo your wish. And when he tries, it will not break. It will not break, so he was fouled on that. So he goes to his friend Ian, who knows he's on rocky end because he's now realizing from Farrah that Ian always liked Nikki. And when he tells him the truth and everything, he is, of course, as anybody, is dismissive of all this denial, all this, and he is just telling him, begging him. I mean, the dude is coming in with some blood on him, and he is still not questioning all of this. He could have even probably humored him, but instead of being like the bigger person than he was, instead of just trying to believe in the possible faith of the true, instead of wishing for Freaky, or better yet, wishing Nikki to love him instead of Bear, He just wishes for $1 billion, which starts raining from the sky. When you confirming all of this is how it's really good. And you know something? It's very careful what you have to say. Because obviously when he worded like wishing for love him more than anyone else in the world, that's when you know it's going off the rails. Wishing something like $1 billion, I don't really see any issue with that. Except maybe the IRS. But who knows? Anywho, after that failed Kabako, he only has one extra wish will left that he unfortunately cannot use, but there might be one person who might would wish if she could get through to her enough for her to break the wish and to wish for herself. And that is Nikki. He gets back home and as I described, she is trying to look more like Sarah and has like he did with Bear's cat, he has Sarah now, big body and some kind of ritual in a chair. And when he is like just half at it, he wants to just he just wants to reach out to her. But that's when freaking Nikki pulls out a gun. He's ready to dare to shoot himself. And then Ian, like a poor idiot trying to help out when he realized he made mistakes saying money and all that. No, trying to show off money or whatever. As unfortunately when he breaks out the door, freaking Nikki shoots him and he dies. And and it just really shows you how messed up Bear has did this to Nikki, you know, in the end. When finally realizing that how much he's done and everything to Bear, to Nikki, that ended up hurting the three other people he was closest to. That he decides he convinces freaking Nikki enough to let him go to the bathroom, take out a bottle of pills, or no, he tries. He doesn't have the gun. He finds a way to get the gun away from Nikki, but doesn't have the balls to shoot him himself. No, he decides to take this opportunity to just see if he'll slowly, you know, choke down on some pills. Only we realizing that the motherfucker was about to puke them out. He was not. He was attempted to kill, to say, but didn't have the girl to see it through. That's worse than just being a. I don't even know. That's somehow. I can't find a word worse than being a coward. But despite all of that, unfortunately, and by just some coincidence, by some sad twitch of faith, if you will, that's when freaking Nikki, when seeing the wish will that the bear gave to her, and hopefully she could undo which the bear did to him. Instead, she wished for Bear to love her more than anyone else in the world. And you know that's a bad mixed combination. If that is probably the definition of the worst unhelpable relationship in entire existence. When he comes out of that bathroom and then see a moment like they're finally both are in a way sadly or finally loving the other for who they are, but the illusion destroys itself once Bear finally succumbs to the overdose he put in his body and dying and all that. Freaking Nikki was this close about blowing her head out, but then the moment finally Bear's heart starts beating, that's when the real Nikki returns. That's when the witch finally breaks, and it's unfortunately terrible for our girl Nikki, because she is now going to have to face some serious punishment for things she had no control over. That she did nothing really wrong, but she is going to be worse, face punishment for the deaths of her best friends that she only did because the most person she cared about and more made the most selfish thing which to do to her, and it ended up hurting everyone he knows, and it ended up ruining the one person he loved most in this world's life forever. It just makes you think what your life is all about. Because it can't be just to be about. I learned that things can be about I can have things about me, but be more than that. You have to have an open mind, an open book, 24/7. And my maybe too deep because it's all a movie. It makes you ask those questions and actually see what you're doing in your day-to-day life. So after hearing me and discussing about this video, I hope you can take some art from this too and apply it to your own life as I apply it to mine, whoever I end up with. Thank you for listening to so far on this discussion. And more to come. I'm hashtag See Me. See you soon. Peace.